Hi, everybody. I know we're all still probably kind of reeling from the last essay, but the clock's ticking and it's time to talk about the next one and be thinking about it as you are working on your other assignments. So, for this one, since our thematic unit right now is crime and punishment, this essay is a criminal literary minds essay. What does that mean? Well, a little quote up here from Dostoevsky if you want to check it out from the classic Crime and Punishment. What you're going to do is you're going to select one work of literature from our course's crime and punishment themed reading list. So you had a selection of short fiction pieces, short stories, and a couple of plays, or it can be one of the poems. So it needs to come from either of those. And it can be one that you talked about on the discussion board. It doesn't have to be, though, it's up to you. So you're going to pick one and you are going to connect it to the world around us, the quote unquote real world, combining your literary analysis of the work using the literary analysis skills you've developed this semester, depending on what type of literature it is. Obviously, what we focus on in short fiction is going to be a little bit different from poetry and vice versa, with outside research about topics in current society to make a case for whether the literary work still resonates in today's day and age. You can argue that it does, you can argue that it doesn't. Either is valid, but you just need to be able to support it by looking closely at the work, the literary devices being used, and looking at like the research from what our current society is dealing with and how that either connects with what's being talked about in the literature or maybe shows that, okay, we've moved past these things, or these things aren't quite as realistic or relevant, or it's problematic in some way. Like, all those are valid takes. So you're going to stay in third person for this, just like you did for the other essay. There's actually a lot of overlap with this one and the other one, and we'll talk about what those are. You need to avoid generalizations. So I know that can be hard to do when we talk about crime and punishment. It's really easy to paint things with a broad brushstroke, but hopefully some of the nonfiction stuff that y'all looked at for the nonfiction discussion board kind of changed your thinking a little bit on certain things. But we certainly want to avoid making generalizations about entire groups of people and, motives behind certain crimes, et cetera, et cetera. And it should not discuss your personal experiences at all. Okay, so this is going to be focused purely on the literature and the outside research. So this is going to be made up of two things, right? So in a literary argument, and yes, we can argue about literature, and we frequently do, the idea is to carefully create an opinion about that work of literature, in this case, whether it still resonates or not, and then support it. And this support comes from two places. Again, your interpretation of the literary elements used in that work of fiction that you're going to discuss, analyze in further detail, look at more closely, meaning like you're bringing in quotes and things like that from the work of literature and looking at them closely. Analysis, right? And also the application of outside source support. So in this case, you're going to use at least 3 library database sources. And something that's a little bit different, a little bit special, is that at least one of them needs to be a literary source. Now, they can all be literary sources. Some of y'all might find that that's, you get in there and you're like, oh, this is great. I love all this. I just want to stick with this stuff, and that's fine. But at least one of the 3 needs to be a literary source. So I've got some more details about that below. And I'm actually going to make a separate video where I show you the library databases that we have, how they work, and the kinds of source material that you can be bringing in. So much like the last essay, and this was actually something that I probably commented on the most in the feedback videos. Unfortunately, we don't have time for those this time, so hopefully you're watching this and taking it in. The introduction is crucial in narrowing your focus and providing any necessary background information needed to understand the scope and context of your argument. So it needs to have 2 things. Again, you need to have a basic summary in your own words, this time of the literary work. So the short story or the play or the poem that you picked. And actual information about the real world issue raised by the literary work that you're going to be focusing on in greater detail later, that is sourced, cited, and substantive. So just like last time, I've pointed y'all to my favorite place to get that kind of information, which is Credo Reference, that database, because it is a really phenomenal research starting point, and it's a great place to get, like it says, definitions, statistics, other forms of background information. You may be able to find what you need there, you may not, but it's definitely worth a look. Your thesis statement needs to be at the end of your introduction. So it needs to identify the work, so the story, the poem, the play, whatever you're talking about, make a case for its relevance or irrelevance to our society today, and narrow your reasons for that to 3 main points, which you're going to elaborate on in your 3 main body paragraphs. So very similar to last time. So I've got an example here of a thesis about one of the plays that you have as an option on the short fiction reading list. Trifles remains sadly relevant today by depicting the specific desperations, frustrations, and injustices suffered by women trapped in domestic violence. So this example hits every mark here, right? Identifies the work, makes a case for the relevance, and gives 3 specific reasons why that would then be elaborated on further, using, again, examples from the play in the form of direct quotes, but also outside source support about like the real world desperations, frustrations, injustices suffered by women trapped in domestic violence. And that's how you're making the connection between the literature and the real world. So body paragraphs, just like last time, topic sentence that relates back to the thesis statement. You're going to elaborate on it with details and examples from the literary text in the form of direct quotes from the literature and analysis, which then you augment, you back up, you support with your database source support evidence. So this is an argument. And each body paragraph has to have both forms of support, stuff from the literature in the form of direct quotes and stuff from your outside sources. That does not have to be in direct quotes. You can paraphrase stuff, summarize stuff from your sources. It still needs to be cited, though, because that shows me you're using an outside source. That's what citation is for. Remember to ice your quotes, particularly when bringing in the literature. So always lead up with context and explain the significance, right? That's introduce and explain, I and E in ICE. If you need a refresher on that, go back and check it out. So here's something that's different about this essay than the last one. You need to also include a separate counterargument and rebuttal paragraph. So I've got a whole presentation for you on counterargument and rebuttal, but basically the idea behind it is that you take a moment to acknowledge what the opposing side might say in response to what you're arguing. Like, what would a reasonable person disagree with here? And then you shoot it down. Don't bring it up and then not shoot it down, because then you just contradict yourself. So, like, what would a reasonable person say is, a reason to feel differently than what you're arguing. A reasonable person, not a, crazy off the wall kind of thing. And then why is it wrong? So this serves to ultimately strengthen your argument, because you deal with something that a reasonable person might take issue with, and you deal with it by shooting it. You bring it up so you can shoot it down. And in doing so, you strengthen your case as a whole. So this needs to be its own separate paragraph, separate from the conclusion, separate from the other body paragraphs. So you're looking at what? Introduction, 3 body paragraphs, 4, counterargument, rebuttal, that makes 5. Conclusion, 6 total for this essay. 6 total paragraphs. Okay. It also needs to have textual support from the poem, play, story, whatever, in the form of a quote that you look at, and outside source support, just like the other ones. Okay. And then conclusion, just like last time, it's not about simply summarizing it. You're going to zoom out to the big picture implications of what this work of literature still has to teach us as a society about crime and punishment. Or if you're going the other direction, what makes it kind of problematic or irrelevant today. And again, that's totally fine. You can make that case. We're going to stay in third person, just like the other one. Don't talk about yourself. Don't talk about me. In terms of length, similar to last time. And for sources, okay, so 2 terms on the lit terms that you need to know for this course, for the final exam, are primary source and secondary source. So now's a good time to learn what that means. A primary source is basically straight from the horse's mouth. It is, in this case, looking at the work of fiction, the poem or the short story or the play. Okay, we're going to treat that as our primary source. Secondary sources are not firsthand. They're sources about other sources, basically. That's what makes them secondary. So your database sources are going to be the secondary sources here. So like another example for a primary source, if you found, let's say, an original letter written from, I don't know, one president to a general during a war, and you analyze that, that would be a primary source. If you found an article about that letter or that talked about that letter in some capacity from another researcher, that would be a secondary source. So in this case, we're using the databases again, no Google for anything. If you need to use more sources than the 3, that is fine, but they also have to come from the library databases, okay? I know you know how to Google stuff. That doesn't impress anybody, right? You need to show that you can use the databases effectively for this level of scholarly argumentation and research. So again, at least one of those needs to come from one of our literature databases, and I've actually linked to the LibGuide that has the full list of our literature databases. And like I said, I'm going to make a separate video so this doesn't get too long, where I take you through some of my favorite ones, the ones that I think would be the most use to y'all, some good ways to search within them, and the kinds of stuff you can be using. But I give you a little breakdown here, right? It can be biographical information about the writer, about the author or poet, stuff about their life, real life. It can be critical analysis of the particular work. So sometimes you can get lucky and you can find an article that is about the poem or about the short story or about the play. Not always. And if you don't, that's okay. Don't give up. Doesn't mean, it just means like some of the stuff on our list are a little bit more obscure. And that doesn't mean it's bad or that you should cut and run and try something else, because I guarantee you that there will be other stuff written about that author or poet's work in general as a writer. Okay. So don't give up. That's okay. If you can find stuff just about their work as a writer in general that you can apply to the situation at hand, that's just as good. So I get a lot of messages, a lot of emails about this from students who panic. I can't find an article about capital punishment by Sherman Alexie. Okay, that's fine. Go find something about Sherman Alexie's work in general as a writer. Okay, because he wrote a lot of different stuff. He wrote Black Eye of the Month Club, which a lot of y'all talked about that back in the identity section. So he's pretty prolific. There's lots of stuff out there, but that poem's a little bit more obscure. So, okay, no big deal. Just like last time, in-text citations, works cited page, everything needs to be there. You need to have a works cited entry for the poem or play or short story, and you need to be citing it in text as well. So all that stuff's covered in the citation quick guide, of course, and I expect you to follow those guidelines, okay? All right. I suggest focusing first on your analysis of the poem or the play or the short story, first and foremost, before you start looking too deeply at outside research. So I suggest doing the outline before doing your navigating the databases assignment. I know they're due on the same day, but that's just what I would suggest doing, because the sources are there to support your ideas, not supply them to you. Okay. You're looking for backup. You know, they're not going to fight your entire fight. Okay. So I actually mentioned this a little bit. So brainstorming is just like last time. We're just going to kind of answer some questions and give a sense of kind of where your head's at on this. Make sure things are going in the right direction. The outline is going to be focused purely on the literature. Examples you want to bring in from this story or play or poem, some analysis of that, just focus on purely on the literary analysis of your own at this point. And then the database, navigating the databases assignment, is going to be focused on the outside sources. So don't talk about your outside source stuff yet. This is just you and what your heart and mind and spirit are telling you, what you're seeing in this piece of literature, okay? And then you're going to merge these things together into the paper, just like last time, okay? Again, sorry we don't have time for draft videos like last time, but I am here to help, so feel free to message me with any questions as you're working, or if you want to show me anything, I'm happy to look at it. I'll let you know my thoughts, and yeah, just when in doubt, go back and look at the instructions. Everything's in there, or send me a message. All right, thanks everybody, and have a good week. Bye-bye. Oh, and there'll be 2 more other videos, so keep an eye out for those.